I really wanted to be very professional and start speaking in French, saying Je suis très ravie d'être ici avec vous. But my French is horrible. The introduction was great. You will see a lot of stuff today that says, fuck, life really sucks. And it is true that what you will plunge into with me tonight is unexpected. In a way, it will also be quite provocative, so I will try and ask you questions. And the first thing that I will do is to show you a blank slide, because I'm going to play with you, and I hope you will play along with me and be good sports. Otherwise, I'm going to leave in 2 seconds. So, what I will do, straight out, is to ask you, what is the great... I need to see hands, so I'm going to just move a little bit. Yeah, I see hands. What is the greatest invention in our cultural history, in our cultural evolution? The greatest thing that was ever invented by humankind. I'm going to show you several things. You can vote many times or once. You decide how many times you want to vote. And I will take notes and see where our survey leads us, because I have an idea. And I'm going to provoke you into this idea and see what you do. So, what is the greatest invention? I'll give you 30 seconds. You can vote as many times as you want, as I told you. But think about it. Greatest invention in our cultural evolution. The wheel. Hands up. Need to see hands. Ooh. I get more usually. Not that many. Are you thinking? Are you actually thinking? I want everybody to play. This is no, oh no, I'm not going to raise my hand kind of thing. Everybody needs to raise their hands. And I'm keeping counts. So, wheel, please. Okay, changing your minds. You're thinking, you're starting to think. Next, telephone. Of course, this includes the mobile phone, right? Ooh. Very many, I would say about like 20. How many people do we have here? 200? 150? Something like that? 250! Not very many hands. Okay. Next one. Car. If you tell me that the car has wheels and therefore you're not going to vote because you voted already for the wheel, that makes no sense whatsoever. Come on, car. Have you? Oh, wow, I see a throng of cars over there. You're the only ones. One. Interesting. This, I'm going to keep track of all of this and then use you in my next book. Not the Cambridge University Press one, another one. The campus. This usually gets a lot of votes. I would never vote for this one. This, to me, completely banal. Yeah, I'm impressed and surprised. Marco, veramente, the compass? Seriously? Because you're from Venice. And navigation and all of that stuff. Computer. L'ordinateur. Okay, some of you have voted twice. I'm a very perceptive looker. Some of you have voted twice. Some real people have voted the computer. Interesting. Technology. Okay. Can I see it again, computer? We only have 45 minutes. Come on. Yeah, quite a lot. The light bulb. Light bulb. Yeah, getting pretty full. This is unexpected to me. I've never seen so many light bulbs. The aeroplane. The aeroplane nearly left me in Bologna today. You're voting for the aeroplane? Really? Seriously? Not gonna come back. TV set. Just one? Can you come here with me? The loner cowboy. Just one, seriously, just one. This is interesting. This interests me. Antibiotics. You know, I gave a talk once and I had a room full of medics and doctors and everybody was like preaching to the choir. Quite a lot, very good. Written language. That's why I'm here. Just, you're licking my butt here. Can you please? Okay, everybody. I'm staying. I was going to go, I'm staying. Thank you. Now, this is interesting to me, not because I'm keeping track of what you've done. It's interesting to me because it happened that I went a couple of years ago to an exhibition in Stockholm at the Science Museum, and they had actually done this. They'd done a survey of the most incredible 100 innovative inventions in the history of mankind. And if you look at this list, you see the written language is number 30, which was very depressing to me as I was writing a book about the invention of writing, and the title was The Greatest Invention. It kind of, brought me into a pretty depressive state of mind, thinking that what I think is arguably the greatest invention in the world is relegated to number 30. But if you think about the things that come before it in the survey, the computer, printed press, telephone even, they take for granted the invention of writing as a thing that then was harnessed into their own technology. So could you have an ordinateur sans written language? You could not. Could you have a telephone without written language and numbers? You could not. The pen, the biro. So it really made me think that it brought home to me the fact that we are dealing with one of the most incredibly revolutionary things that human beings came to concoct. And it made me think about what we call an invention and what we call a discovery. And I think they're two completely different things. And this is what I'm going to try and do with you tonight, is to plunge you into what I think is a bit of a provocation, because we tend to think of a thing that's invented as a thing that starts from a 0 point in time and then continues and then gets applied and it becomes something that we use as an instrument. But I want you to reflect and ponder on the idea of discovery rather than invention, even though I have written a book about the greatest invention. And what I will do is to test you again, because this is so much fun. Now, map of the world, if I asked you, who invented writing, where, and when? We have the head management of the ERC that replied in a nanosecond, and she said, if you don't know, the ERC is the European Research Council that gave me money, so I paid her.
I didn't say it was my neighbor.
Oh, did you? Oh, sorry. Oh, you're the one. I've taken literally the concept of cocktail and science. Mesopotamia. Are we all on this? Mesopotamia, which is here, modern Iraq. 4th millennium BC, we're dealing with 6,000 years ago. Is that right? I mean, it's on the slide, right? But is that right? Yes, no? Hands? China. It's right and wrong at the same time, because back in the day, and we're dealing with 2 generations ago when I was born, the idea was that Mesopotamia was the actual original invention of writing, and from there the invention spread all over the world by traction, by cultural transmission. But this was the monogenetic, we could say, like the one and only invention in the world. And things have changed a lot because research has moved on and progressed, and we now see 4 inventions of writing in the world. We see Mesopotamia, but we also see Egypt pretty much around the same time. And we also see China at the end of the Bronze Age in 1200 BC, and also Mesoamerica with the earliest Maya in the first millennium. This means that when we talk about invention, we're talking about something that happened ex nihilo, from zero, without any transmission from a culture that already had writing. And this means, the implication is huge, it means that the human brain got to that result, that big achievement, that big success, independently, in a pristine way. It tells us about our own brain and how it works. It's not like inventing the wheel. The wheel was invented once, and then by traction and transmission, it got carried all over the world. We are dealing with original inventions. This is a problem, because not only is it a multiple thing, but it raises a big question. If we have found 4, and the evidence points in the direction of 4, and now consensus is established on these 4 inventions, things are getting serious and nobody's laughing anymore, we can posit that there were more. And this is where I enter into the picture. There may be more inventions of writing. Point being that we have 2 uncertain cases. One comes from the Indus Valley. We're talking about India and Pakistan, modern India and Pakistan, and we're dealing with a similar time frame as Mesopotamia in Egypt. We're talking about the 4th millennium BC. Question mark, was it invented from zero? We don't know. On account of 2 reasons. One, the script has not been deciphered. 2, nobody is studying it properly. The script has not been deciphered means that we don't know how to read the language that's recorded by that script. We cannot channel it into a family of languages. We cannot read the inscriptions and the texts. Same thing happens for Easter Island, Rapa Nui, in the deepest recesses of the Pacific, a tiny, tiny island, and I will take you there tonight, where a system of writing was created. We don't know when, and you will see what happens when we talk about the when of this scenario. But again, the writing system is undeciphered. We don't know how to read the language, even though we may have hints and suggestions as to what that language may be. So, the question is, if writing was invented at least 4 times and maybe more, how did it happen? What is at stake when it comes to framing the greatest invention in the world? Now, sadly, this project, funded by Angela, who's actually on the phone at the moment. She's harnessing writing into the telephone. Sadly, this project has finished. It was funded by the European Research Council, Inscribe Inventional Scripts and the Beginnings, which sought to understand how writing was invented through cognitive science. Why do the shapes of signs look the way that they do? Who created them? Why, to what end? For what purpose? What are the mechanisms for the earliest linguistic notation? Can we apply the state-of-the-art, most incredibly advanced techniques in digital humanities to actually see the inscriptions perfectly? And can we decipher them? Can we decipher Rongo Rongo from Easter Island? Can we decipher the Indus Valley script? The project ended a couple of months ago, but we are not sad because we got funding for more. But I'll walk you through what we're trying to do. Another thing that the project really wanted to do was to tackle the decipherment of ancient scripts, the earliest scripts in Europe, from the island of Crete in the Aegean and Cyprus. These are 3 scripts that you can see from the data that's being recorded on the slide. Small data, very few inscriptions. Not as many as you would have for other scripts that got decrypted. Cretan hieroglyphic, Linear A, and Cypreminoan. This has been an obsession of mine. I've written so much about the Cypreminoan script from Cyprus, 3,500 years ago. Amazing, so pretty. And I shouldn't say this. Are we recording this? Are we taping this? I'm not going to say it. Shall I say it? We are this far from deciphering it. We're there. Bear with us. I'm not going to be talking about this, although I would love to. Maybe next year when we actually make the announcement. I don't know. But these scripts are tantalizing because in so many years, I would say 130, 40 years, nobody has studied them systematically to apply techniques that can actually help us to crack them. You may know that part of this family has another specimen, which is this one. Who knows what this is? Who said it? You raised your hand, but he said it. Okay. The Festus disc belongs to the Aegean undeciphered family. It's a disc this big that's written on both sides, and it's stamped instead of being inscribed. So this is the earliest evidence that we have of a stamped object with writing. Tantalizing thing, 244 signs. I get emails from people saying, no, I deciphered the Festus disc. It talks about the Turkic language or the Anatolian. Blah, blah. I get the wackiest interpretations. And I always have, it should be in my auto-reply signature. There's no way that you can crack this. This is uncrackable. You can crack your head over this. Bye. But my question is why? I mean, I know that the answer is right, but we're talking about cocktails and science. So I'm asking you the question, the scientific question. Why is it not decipherable? I know I don't look very serious with this in my hand. I heard a very intelligent female voice. It's round. No, that's not. No, it is a text. We're not getting close. I was hoping. Bravo. Bravo. When you have 244 signs, what is the independent evidence that you can confront it with in order to ascertain whether your theory is viable? In other words, just to make it very brief, you cannot apply the scientific method. You can come up with any hypothesis, but there's no validation or falsification of your hypothesis. You cannot test it. If King Minos from the Palace of Crete came to me in a dream and said, this is the solution to the Festus disc problem, how would I convince you that whatever he told me in the dream is actually viable? I have no independent, original proof that can strengthen any theory. You can come up with anything. How do you test it? No validation. No scientific method can be applied. So this is, don't write to me, I've deciphered. cannot be done. Part of the family, if you have a linear A, means that you have a linear B. Part of the family of the Aegean scripts is linear B, which, as you can see, has more data. And in fact, it was deciphered. It comes directly from linear A. That's why it's called linear B. Very imaginative scholars we have in the Aegean. It was deciphered in 1953 by, believe it or not a linguist, not an archaeologist, not a philologist, not an epigraphist, not a paleographer. I should change my job. An architect deciphered this in 1953. And he applied a completely original, new methodology. He had no bilingual inscriptions. He had no original text that could be used to test the theories. He managed to decrypt the script without any external evidence. He did it just by sheer methodology of a systematic nature. What he did was to assess something that we are trying to do, and we managed to do, and we applied successfully to the other scripts, as far as the Cyprus-Minoan script is concerned. He applied the scientific method. Now, bear with me, this is quite technical. Not going to get too much into it, but when you have a script that you don't know, when you have an ancient writing that you don't know, the first thing that you do, if you don't have a bilingual, a text written in with the same phrases, with the same sentences in a language that you know, that's what a bilingual is. What you need to do is deal with the internal data that you have at your disposal, which means that you're going to look at every single sign that you have. Every single sign that you have. If you have 8,000 texts, you will look at thousands and thousands of signs, right? And you will build an ABC, a repertoire of all the signs in the system, from A to Z. You will try to single out how many signs are recurrent in your texts, and you will close what we call the sign list, the inventory, the repertoire of the signs. First thing that you need to do. Then the second thing is that you will need to position these signs. You will need to see whether these signs only appear in initial position within a word, or if they appear only at the end of a word, in order to see whether there's any feature that can tell you about grammar. You will need to see repetitions and positions in a distributional, statistical way that will enable you to see how the signs work within the words and the sentences. You will need to build an architecture of method that will reconstruct how the written language works. Not easy if you have a lot of text. And then you will need to see whether you have any inklings or suggestions or indications as to what the subject matters may be, the topics that are dealt with the inscriptions. I'll give you an example. If you have very short inscriptions on really high status objects such as jewelry or bronze or silver or gold objects, very, very short, what is the thing that maybe with strong probability be recorded? They're very good. And this is what we did with Cyprus-Minoan. We've highlighted and recognized and identified a plethora of names. But names tell us nothing, because Sylvia and Stéphane and Sophie tell us nothing about our language. 2 Greek names, a Roman name. I'm Italian, they're Belgian, right? Names and names of places tell us nothing about the grammar. So step 2 and 3 are crucial. We need to identify how the words work within the phrases. If there is inflection, mon ami, mes amis, if there is anything that's repeated, as a root, and anything that changes as a final sort of, ending. So this is really, really important in order to reconstruct how the language works internally, how the script is used on different objects with an archaeological contextualization, and also how the scripts are related one with the other. How Cretan hieroglyphic, the earliest script in Europe, is related to linear A, and how linear A is related to linear B, and how linear A and linear B are related to Superminoan. You reconstruct the whole thing. And this is what we did, but I'm not going to be talking about this. Although you can have a look at one of the things that we tried to do, which is, I would say, the first thing that one should be doing when it comes to applying innovative, state-of-the-art techniques. Since we have them, we might as well use them. If you point your very smartphone onto that QR code, you will see that we built a whole, this took me 6 years of my life, and this is why I have wrinkles, 3D models, super high standard advanced 3D models of all of the inscriptions. Why did we do this? Why are 3D model inscriptions important? Because we can read the signs perfectly. And it's not me using a transcription of the catalog as they did in ancient times, when they transcribed by hand and they put in so many mistakes that we had to correct. These techniques help us to see the signs perfectly. They help me to see the A sign that I will write and the one that Sophia will write, which will change ever so slightly. In this way, I can correct and have nice transcriptions of the text. Crucial, innovative thing that we can apply for as sort of, the first step into decipherment prospects. Without this, we are, as we would say, in the introduction, fucked. But we managed to do this for most of the inscriptions. So this is fine and dandy, and I shouldn't have said about the Superminoan, but you will hear about this, so I might as well say it now. We're very close, And with all of these sort of, new techniques and new strategies, we managed to push the agenda, make incredible strides into decipherment techniques and application. Now, back to the QR code that you haven't used, and I noticed that nobody has used it. Our brain, and this is the important thing that I wanted to talk to you about, leave aside decipherment. Maybe we can talk about this another day. But our brain doesn't read this QR code. For our retina, this QR code is completely unintelligible, whereas we can read script because it's got some golden rules, black and white contrast, a certain number of segments in the configuration of each sign, not too much random diversity and variety in the sign shapes. There are rules that come with writing that do not belong to computers. They belong to our brain, to the way in which we perceive the world. So I wasn't very happy with the idea that writing is invented in the places where I showed you that writing, according to the traditional narrative, is invented, because we tend to think of invention generally as a thing that happens around a table. And a group of people decide that a thing is not there and it should be created out of scratch to supply and respond to a need or to solve a problem. And I really thought long and hard about this. Is it the way that writing worked? These scribes in China and Egypt and Mesopotamia, in Uruk, they sat around the table and they said, "Ooh, writing is not here, let's invent it." Is that how it actually worked? Because, if you read your books, your sort of handbooks from high school, middle school, even elementary school, this is what they say, writing wasn't there, it was invented. This is the common traditional narrative. So I went to my team, who's busy deciphering stuff, like really serious things. I went to my team and I said, let's do this. Let's do a project on invention of writing. Let's go back. Let's go further back in time and see what happens. Let's see if there are trajectories to invention. Let's see how this invention happens. Let's see if we can smash the table with the scribes around it down and get to the core of what it means to invent something that's not there, that comes from zero. So a new project was born. They don't like me anymore. My team is like, oh, too much stuff, which is called Sapiens. Symbols, Pre-Literacy and Code Evolution. This was inaugurated a couple of months ago. We still haven't started, but this is. I want to test you. I want to see whether I'm going in the right way, even though I got 2 million euros for this. But let's see. Let's see if you agree with me. And I'm just going to plunge you into a provocation because maybe I'm preaching to the choir. I don't know. Let's see. But I think that writing does not happen from zero in a 0 point in time. I think we need to go back. I think we need to look at the way our brain has harnessed and channeled symbols in the orbit of a specific culture that then became writing. This means going back centuries, if not thousands of years, into how our brain perceives symbols and configurations of shapes around us, and the way in which we interact with the environment to select specific things that are easy on the eye, as opposed to things that we should discard by sheer selective evolution. So I said to my team, let's look at the earliest point in time for all of these inventions, including the ones that are uncertain, Easter Island and Indus Valley, and plunge into code making centuries before writing is actually attested in these areas. And they went, okay, fine, let's have a look. And we saw that there are, I would say, foundations, there is a substratum, there is a trajectory in code making in all of these areas that then becomes writing. It's like by sheer choice and selection, things become part of a repertoire of signs. A closed, finite, determined repertoire of signs that we call writing. The fully fledged package is not a thing that happens from night to day. It's got a whole load of, passages, steps by steps by steps, that leads us to the finished thing. And we saw the evidence for that. We've already seen the evidence for that. I'll show you a couple of things that point in that direction. But then I said to them, let's go even deeper, back in time. And I'm plunging you into 40,000 years ago. This is a chart that wasn't made by me, but by a scholar, a brilliant scholar, Genevieve von Petzinger, who has been studying the earliest symbols from caves, from Paleolithic times. We're dealing with a time frame of 40,000, 1,200 years ago. And she noticed that there are golden rules even there. There are the same basic primitive symbols. These are shapes that are quite elementary. They don't have any iconicity to them. They're not figurative. They do not resemble things. They're very simple. But they come from all over the world. And we need to assume that these groups did not talk to each other. There was no communication between these groups. There was no communication. These are tiny groups. But in caves, from Paleolithic times, Upper Paleolithic, from 40,000 years ago, we see the same stuff being represented on cave walls. This is incredible. And it's also quite complicated and sophisticated because we have sequences. We have a budding phase of code making that speaks to our capacity as human beings, as sapiens, to select shapes that are easy on the eye. And it all starts off with the most, one could say banal, arguably, thing that one could do. We are here in Sulawesi, a fantastic island that I've been studying quite a lot lately in Indonesia. This is the very earliest representation of an icon made intentionally by humans, and it's the impression of a hand repeated. And as you can tell, it's not the impression with the pigment on the palm of the hand, it's pigment that's been blown around the fingers, which is quite a sophisticated, advanced technique, and we find it from all over the world in Paleolithic times. All of the caves from 40,000 years on have this. It's our first, earliest interaction and manipulation, literally manipulation, with the environment that surrounds us. Whatever the meaning of that thing, that's the earliest thing that we did to express something. Quite incredible that groups that have no contact with each other do the same thing all over the Paleolithic world. I'm not going to plunge into why and how and neuroscience, don't care about that. But look at that, look at that. We are in one of the most, has anybody ever been to a cave, Paleolithic cave, to look at shapes? It's one of the most, isn't it one of the most amazing experiences that one could ever have? It's just so incredibly foreign and unworldly, otherworldly, and almost inhuman to be in a space that can be so dark with no oxygen. And human beings 40,000, 35,000 years ago went into the deepest recesses of these caves and started doing these things. From a line, which is the quintessentially most salient in terms of focus, of cognitive focus, from one line that's repeated, you create perspective, multiplicity, color, differentiation, iconography. One line. The line is the essential feature that makes everything that we represent possible, writing and whatever else. It's the cognitively most important thing that we can use to leave a trace. And this is banal. Yes, it is banal, but where does it come from? How can we assume that as human beings we made this possible? And there is no easy explanation for this, as much as we can, rack our brains and scratch our heads. There's no unison explanation for this. But look at this. I think the environment plays a huge part. This is from Peshmel, which is, I actually sneaked this photo. It was forbidden, and of course I took a photograph. 28,000 years ago, Peshmel in France, in the Lot region. This is a pointed horse. There are two of them and hands impressed all over the place. But look, I wish I had a pointer, but I don't need a pointer because I'm very tall and I can climb all over the place and show you this. You can't see me. Look at the face of the horse. Look at the snout of the horse. It's as if the shape of the cave, the surface of the cave, is suggesting what ought to be drawn on it. This is not just one random coincidental instance that we have. It's not the only example that we have. We have plentiful examples in which the actual surface of the cave tells you what to draw on it. And this tells me that there's a deep entanglement between things, the world that surrounds us, and what we choose to do, how we choose to manipulate that. And then you have really complicated things, a choreography, a cinema-like scenery of big animals that seem to be telling us a story, a narrative of hunting, chasing, narrative, iconography, primitive art. This is what they call it. And we may agree that it is not primitive, it's super advanced. 30,000 years ago, 35,000 years ago, it's not primitive. There's nothing primitive to it. But, and this is where I plunge you into my provocation, I'm not even sure that this is art. Together with all of these iconographic features, we find a plethora, in an incredibly insane amount of geometric shapes. Here you see an example of a greedy-like structure here, shape, with a horse, what looks like a horse, and then they're called penniforms, and then other geometric schematic things. The ratio between geometric to iconographic is 6:1, which means that geometric and schematic are all over the place in incredible numbers. Where do they come from? What is the relation between all of these geometric forms and the iconography? Is there a relation between them? What do they mean? Do they mean anything? Believe it or not, this thing has never been studied before. There's got to be a way in which we can plot, using also computational methods, the association between all these iconographic signs and the geometric and schematic signs together, to see whether we can get to the actual explanation of how code making works. My provocation is this. This is not writing. This will never be writing in the way that we define writing today, which is a definite, finite number of signs that are used to record a specific language. I'm not trying to crack this or decipher this. This is not my aim. But what I'm saying as a provocation is that what we have are the cognitive ingredients to a recipe. The shapes and the association of shapes that work together to deliver a message. And this message was understandable by the people that looked at it as much as it was understandable by the people that made it. And it is not a coincidence that we do see preferences, in this sort of, map that Genevieve had built. That's a general map. But we see specificities of messages, of signs, geometric and schematic signs that go together with specific iconographic shapes. It's as if what we're looking at is the substratum, the springboard, the fountain, the source from which a specific message was built. So if this is right, we have two questions. The first one is that symbol making and the possibility of abstraction, the possibility of creating metaphors and playing out with meanings was already young and alive and kicking 40,000 years ago. What we're dealing with is not just art. It's a very advanced, sophisticated way of communicating things. And the second thing that we need to think about is, where do these schematic geometric signs come from? Now, when I was trying to answer this question, which was just a thing that I was obsessing with months ago, I bumped into the work of a fantastic cognitive scientist called Stanislas Dehaene. He works at the Collège de France in Paris. And he realized one of the things that Homo sapiens managed to distinguish himself from all other species was not so much the capacity for language, which is what we think is the sort of, the USP, the unique selling propositions of the sapiens that delivered our success as a species. No, it wasn't that. It wasn't just language. It was geometry. It was the fact that we build things. We think, we conceive in terms of geometric shapes. This is what makes us human. And it made me think about a fantastic quote from Galileo, not because he's Italian, as I am, but because this tells you everything that you need to know. This is the quintessential human experience. The world and the universe cannot be read without glasses until we have learned the language and become familiar with the characters in which it is written. It is written in mathematical language, and the letters are triangles, circles, and other geometrical features without which means it is humanly impossible to comprehend a single word. And it made me think about another thing. It made me think about the potential for communication. What you need to have is not just that. You need to have rules to use all of these shapes. You need to have some regulation, an architecture that will help you to express things, to communicate them. From the most primitive, from the most elementary shapes, a line that becomes a circle, you can have more and more and more complicated, sophisticated, articulated shapes that go within, that they can be embedded one into the other, concatenated, iterated, repeated, to create hierarchies, not just to use them one adjacent to the other, not just to use them in a sequence. They need to be embedded and nested one into the other. From the most basic to the most nested, to the most hierarchical and the most complex. And if you think about the way in which we communicate, that's exactly how it works. We use iteration, we repeat things to be understood, we use concatenation, we put things one close to the other. We use recursivity. If I say that I went to that market, which I had found on Google because I'm creating hierarchies, I'm creating a system of phrases that are nested one into the other. And this is all based on one premise, which is how human beings use those symbols. We combine them. Animals combine symbols, they combine things together, but they never go beyond that. Their hierarchies are very, very tiny. Their hierarchies are not complicated. They associate two things together, three things together. They don't go beyond that. Our unique selling proposition is the fact that we not only combine, but we create compositions. We create complex systems within systems. And this can be done on the basis of a limited number of things, be they tiny little segments that become more complicated shapes, be they geometric, be they the horses on the surface of a cave, or be they letters. And these letters that can be combined and compose combinatorial potential, composition potential to produce an infinite series of logical expression. This is exactly what an alphabet does. From our 26 letters, we create a digital infinitive of potential expression. We do the same thing with numbers. All you need to have is the potential for combination, and you create entire possible universes. This is a thing that only human beings can do. And it all starts with those primitive artistic expressions. They are much more than that. In those expressions, you have the budding, the springboard, the launch to whatever we call the possibility of symbolic abstraction. And this made me think that there is a continuity. There is a continuity in this symbol making, in this association, in this combinatorial, compositional potential that only human beings can express. That starts in the Paleolithic and it continues, it goes on. And I've been studying this site, which is called Göbekli Tepe in Anatolia. It dates from 12,000, 11,000 years ago. This is the earliest building that we have in the world. The very first the archaeologists have unearthed. And here, we just published this article in Cambridge Archaeological Journal. We see that. We see the code making much before writing is invented. We see that combinatorial, compositional potential. We see it enacted over and over and over again, which means that writing was not created here. This is not the beginning of writing. But the way in which our mind works towards that very end, the ingredients to the recipes are all there. They're all there. They're already in place in prehistory. Don't ever call it prehistory. That's not pre. It's history already. And then there's a big misconception that what we assume is social complexity with a fully formed society has these ingredients. You know, you have the big city or the empire. In the Neolithic, there's a big revolution. This is, again, the textbook narrative, big revolution. The city is born 8,000 years ago, and it's got all of these ingredients. There's a demographic expansion that leads to agricultural expansion, that leads to a surplus and a deposit of what's being cultivated, that leads to the elites emerging that take control over the situation. Of course, there's social stratification, and then you have craft workers that can specialize, and the situation is being legitimized and put into an equilibrium by long-distance trade. Richness, wealth is balanced. The elite has to express itself through monumental architecture, through ideological features such as art and religion. You have exact sciences that start controlling things, taxes and people and lands. You have the big empire, and you have writing. Writing is part and parcel of this thing. Without writing, you don't have social stratification. You don't have the urban revolution. And by the same token, without urban revolution, you do not have writing. I say bollocks to that. We've been living with this for more than 100 years, ever since Gordon Childe, an Australian anthropologist, modeled this. The city has to have all of these ingredients. No, wrong. There are empires and big complex cities, Kerma in Nubia, south of Egypt, 1,000 years without writing. They never developed writing, they never adopted it, they never used it, they never probably even saw it. The Inca, they controlled thousands of kilometers of lands and people. Never developed writing, never used it. They used a computational method called the quipu, very interesting this one, but we'll not talk about this, without ever developing, inventing, producing, adopting writing from elsewhere. They managed. Writing is not that, indispensable. they managed to survive without it. Big empires, big cities. And conversely, one would say, you have a context, very nice, sunset, on Easter Island, where you have no social stratification. We are at the tribe level in anthropological parlance, in anthropological modeling. Tribes that built the very famous Moai statues. This is a tiny island in the deepest recesses of the Pacific. We are 2,700 kilometers away from the coast of Chile. To even get there is an odyssey. Tiny little island, 25 square kilometers, 4 volcanoes inactive. Beautiful place. Never had a stratified society. Never, never, ever. The myth tells us that Hotomatua arrived, tribesman, chief, arrived to the island with his wife and children, and 27 tablets written with a very mysterious script, and colonized the island. The island is called Easter Island because in 1722, a Dutch explorer arrived on Easter Sunday, and since then, it's been colonized and occupied by the Europeans. They found it pretty much deforested once they landed in the 18th century. But what interests me is the writing, and you see here, very nice 3D model that we made of one of these tablets, written in a script that's called Rongo Rongo. So the local tribes created a writing system. We don't know where from, how. They just created it in a context whereby the expectation for it to be applied to bureaucratic, administrative purpose was not there, wasn't necessary. So why was it created? And how was it created? And who did it? And when did they do it? Was it created by the locals out of sheer impulse from having seen the European occupiers using a writing system, and therefore the locals adopted it by sheer reaction to what they saw? Or was it created originally? Question mark. Big question, because if it was invented from scratch by the local population, how did they do it? Did they actually do it? The common narrative is that, no, the Rapa Nui people could not have invented this. Too difficult to invent writing in a context where you don't have social stratification. Why would they do it? It makes no sense. Writing is used for administrative purposes. They didn't need that. So clearly they copied the Europeans. Of course, this reeks of European, Euro-centralized superiority, doesn't it? I mean, why shouldn't the locals be sophisticated enough to produce writing from scratch? So in order to answer this question, we decided to test this scientifically, as one should do. All the inscriptions are written on wood tablets. So the thing that one does when they have organic material such as wood is to apply a technique which is called radiocarbon, which gives us the exact dating in absolute terms of the wood. It tells us when the wood of the tree is dead, as in is being cut. And we tested this with radiocarbon dating in a lovely lab in Bologna. And we came out with amazing results because a couple of the tablets are very, 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 very old. Their wood is very, very, very old, which means that the wood predates the arrival of the Europeans by 250 years. We have two options. Either the wood is very, very old and the inscription is very, very old, and therefore it predates the arrival of the Europeans, and therefore the script was invented from scratch. Or the wood was preserved for 250 years and then inscribed. Now I'm gonna have you have a look at the signs. This dates to 1505, perfect radiocarbon, okay? It's made of actual, the wood we don't really know. It could come from the vicinity of the island. We're not really sure about the wood because, botanics on the island are very, very dodgy, very sketchy. Would you be able to inscribe iconic signs such as those on wood that's 250 years old? This is a wood that will dry out in 250 years. To inscribe afterwards shapes like that? Not so sure. But we're not, let's leave the question unanswered. Let's leave it as a sort of, pending question. What we decided to do was to test all of the tablets. Now, there are 27 tablets written in Rongo-Rongo in this script. They're scattered all over the world, which entails a lot of traveling and a lot of money being spent on such crazy pursuits. But we went to the National Museum in Santiago del Chile with my engineer, Roberta, and Rafał, who's from Poland. And we managed to look at 4 more inscriptions. We dated 8 of them. As we speak. The project is still ongoing. This is me in my pajamas, long story, cut it short. But we also found another tablet. Now, if I go back, just 1 second, I don't know how much time I have. I'm nearly done. Look at this tablet. The very, very old tablet, very, very old tablet was enwrapped in human hair. You can see it here. Human hair envelops the tablet because it was precious, and the hair was as precious as the tablet. When we went to the museum in Santiago, this is the really, really old tablet. When we went to the museum in Santiago, I saw this thing, and I was like, that's got to be writing. There's got to be writing under it. And right now they're doing a CT scan. Can you imagine? They're doing a CT scan to see if there's writing, and we're still waiting for the results. Point being that we may have even more text, and that can help us with the decipherment. So, big question. If the wood of the tablets is really old, was then Rongo-Rongo invented from zero without any influence from the Europeans? Was it one of the 5 inventions of writing in the world? In order to understand this, we had to go to Easter Island. This is part of my team. Among the Moai, because we all realized that in order to understand, think about the beginning of this talk. In order to understand where a writing system, if maybe invented from zero, comes from, we need to go backwards, right? We need to see the trajectories. We need to see what happens before. And I was like, what happens before this writing system? Even if it's pretty old, but what was there on the island before this writing system? Petroglyphs. They're all over the place. There are more than 5,000 symbols engraved on stones on the island. And these are really, really, really ancient. How do we know that? Because the Moai are really, really, really ancient statues. And they have, look at them, so many petroglyphs all over their bodies. And most of these symbols resemble the Rongo-Rongo writing system. We have found the antecedent, the precursor, the mama of Rongo-Rongo. It's all in that. It's all on the island. So we managed to, this is a lovely, lovely cave. with this sign, the Make sign. I have no time. I would love to talk all about this, but we have no time. We managed to document and 3D scan most of the petroglyphs on the island. And one local archaeologist told me, oh, but you have to go to this cave. This cave is really, really dangerous. And it's over a cliff. The photo doesn't really show this, but this is like 100 meters into the ocean with wind sweeping your hair nicely. And I was like, is it really dangerous? Oh, yeah. Nobody goes there. I sent my team. Look at the sheer horror in their faces. We have the archaeologists from the museum with a dog. And you don't see Mattia, the only boy in the team, because I said Mattia goes first. He's not indispensable. And they survived. And here we are in this cave. And you're seeing these petroglyphs that very few people have seen. We haven't published this yet, but we documented this in 3D. This is ugly, I'm sorry, but my engineer hasn't sent me the pretty one. But we have a 3D model of all of the signs. This is one of the Ana Okeke, which is called it's called Ana Okeke, which means the cave of the virgins, because they sent the locals, Rapa Nui people, they sent young girls into the cave so that they wouldn't be exposed to the sun before they actually were married off. So they had to have really fair skin, and they were segregated into this cave. It's a sad story, but they made fantastic petroglyphs. And we managed to document all of this. We still haven't published this, so please don't show this. But this made me think, okay, maybe the wood of the tablets is old, but that doesn't prove anything. Like, it just proves that it is old wood. It is but a coincidence. But then we have the petroglyphs. So, two coincidences, as Agatha Christie would say, make a clue. But we need one more. 3 coincidences make a proof. And we found it. The wood is local. When the Europeans arrived on the island in the 18th century, the island was pretty much deforested, but some wood is local, which means some wood that was used for the tablets is local. This is the staff, really long inscription in the shape of the staff that we documented in Santiago. It's made of local wood, which gives us pretty much a nice indication that what we have is very ancient wood. And, to make Agatha Christie even happier, some of the signs of the Rongo script are in the shape of plants. One is a tropical palm that's now extinct, but used to be present when the writing system seems to have been created, which means centuries ago. So we have more than one coincidence that points in the direction of this being an invented writing system. And this kind of made the news. I don't want to brag. It's just went all over the place. Oh, did they find the 5th invention of writing? Yes, we did. Question mark? Did the people of Eastern? Yes, they did. Yes. So this got me obsessed with islands. I have an obsession with islands. I have no time. They're kicking us out. I'm writing a book on islands for a publisher in Italy called Feltrinelli. But islands do weird things. But maybe we can talk about this when I've finished the book, which is very long in the making. If you have time and desire and pleasure, I talk about some of the things that I mentioned tonight in a couple of books that I've written. But before I say thank you, because I've kept you for long enough, and Stefan isn't He's laughing. And I haven't finished my cocktail, and we have to. I will say thank you to my lovely team that always smiles, even when I kick them down a cliff to look at petroglyphs. Thank you so much.